A major political impediment to assisted dying or voluntary euthanasia law reform has been the fundamental objection of the mainstream Christian churches, in particular the Catholic Church. It prevails on Catholic MPs to exercise their votes in accordance with church doctrine. To examine the church's attitude, we recorded this interview with the Bishop of Parramatta, Anthony Fisher. Bishop Fisher has degrees in history and law and holds an Oxford University doctorate in bioethics. Cambridge University Press has just published his book Catholic Bioethics for a New Millennium. Bishop Anthony, welcome. Loredana Alessio Mulhall, the MS sufferer we've just seen, says those opposed to her being assisted to die should talk to her to assess her cognitive state and what she calls the agony of her existence. Why can't you accept this woman's right to request to die?
I think all of us would have enormous sympathy for Loredana and for people like her, and certainly as a priest, I have cared for many people with a similar situation, many people who were dying or had long sicknesses, perhaps gradually going downhill as she has been. And I would be saying, first and foremost, we've got to surround people like that with love and support and help them find meaning in their life. She's still a very bright woman, I think still has so much to offer. And I think it'd be very sad for us to lose her.
What she's told us is what she wants to offer is going public on expressing publicly her right to die. I'm asking you, why can't you grant her that right?
I think we all realise that decisions like this are not entirely private. They affect lots of other people. They obviously affect our family, but they affect other sufferers. They affect the medical profession. They affect the law. For instance, our doctors and nurses, if they're to be asked to be part of killing some of their patients, it's a big change from what we've said healthcare is about till now. If we change the law, which till now has had an absolute rule, we kill none of our citizens, and suddenly we're going to say, well, actually, in a certain small group, carefully confined, whatever regulations we put around it, some people are able to be killed. That's a big change in our legal process.
It's confronting, I know, but the polls seem to be indicating that the majority of Australians, including those who declare themselves to be Christian, now accept assisting somebody to die under prescribed circumstances, terminally or incurably ill, is acceptable and supported.
And I think that we need to explain to people that the risks of going down this path, that euthanasia seems like a good last resort for a small group of people. But even on the interviews we've seen tonight, we see how people want to move it along. So we're told to start with, we'll have it just for the terminally ill, and then eventually it will be the chronically ill, and then it'll be people perhaps who don't have a physical illness but a mental illness or depression or existential pain in their life. It will be firstly, autonomous patients consenting, but then in due course it will be people with dementia or little babies or the handicapped.
That's the slippery slope argument. I know it's out there, but can you tell me what is the point of suffering for these people and their families? They don't want to suffer anymore.
And I don't want them to suffer either, and that's why the Catholic Church...
You're a hardliner.
That's why the Catholic Church is so involved in the care of the dying and of the handicapped and of the elderly and puts so much of its energy into the palliative care of these people, into reducing suffering in our world. That's a huge part of our goal in this sort. So it's not that we want everyone to suffer. We put our resources in, we walk our talk about this.
You believe in what you call redemptive suffering, don't you? What's that mean?
The theological thought here is that sometimes suffering can make something greater of us, that depending on how we suffer, the attitude with which we suffer, some people show tremendous nobility. And I think we've all experienced this in watching elderly people as their powers decline and perhaps they suffer more and more pain, but something beautiful appears in them, the way they deal with that, the way they live that. And the thought is, for Christians, by uniting that suffering with the suffering of Christ, that it's part of building up their own virtue, their own contribution to the world, that it's not completely meaningless.
Do you acknowledge that many doctors and nurses in our hospitals and aged care facilities already assist people in extremis to die through what's known as the double effect, administering increasing doses of sedatives ostensibly to relieve pain, but with the probable consequence that the patient will die?
I think if you look at the documents of Palliative Care Australia, and they're the leading people dealing with this very question, they are very insistent that they are never hastening someone's death. They give them the appropriate pain relief, but it's never with the object of shortening their life. They neither try officiously to extend people's life indefinitely, nor do they try to shorten it. They just try to keep whatever life you've got left as comfortable as possible.
Because that goes into a bit of a moral and ethical dilemma in this, doesn't it? Because there exists in Australia what's known as a euthanasia underground. Some clinicians, some health workers who say, yes, I will assist that patient with sedative pain relief, but it will probably kill them, and really knowing that it's going to kill them. You acknowledge that happens?
Well, if there are people out there who are deliberately overdosing their patients, then of course it's illegal, and it's also contrary to the code of ethics of the AMA and of the World Medical Association.
And you would complain about them and have them criminally charged?
I think certainly they should be brought before their professional bodies, and quite possibly they should be criminally charged, yes.
The AMA is opposed to voluntary euthanasia, but it says it has a form of words here. The following forms of management at the end of life do not constitute euthanasia or physician-assisted suicide: the administration of treatment or action intended to relieve symptoms which may have a secondary consequence of hastening death. It seems it must have been written by a Jesuit or a lawyer. There seems to be the wriggle room in that which would protect the doctor who says, I'm going to sedate this person.
No, it's actually a very important point. Often doctors do procedures, it could be heart surgery, it could be giving pain relief, which have an undesired effect that some of their patients die. But that's not why they're doing it. They're not doing it to hasten the patient's death. And I think out of fairness to our doctors and nurses, we have to recognise that sometimes they're engaged in perfectly reasonable activity, but it's risky, but they can honestly say that they're not intending to shorten anybody's life. And I think that's exactly what is happening in the AMA code. That's what they're saying to their doctors.
Now, you've seen what the former DPP Nicholas Cowdery QC had to say. Do you reject this man's vast experience of the criminal law, which has brought him to the point of advocating reform to assist conscientious people to die under prescribed circumstances?
I don't reject his experience, but I reject the conclusion. And in fact, the conclusion was very revealing, because he said as a first step he wants voluntary assisted suicide, but he foresees it going to people who can't volunteer, who can't even give their consent or not, people who aren't physically sick. He foresees and actually intends a whole, what people call the slippery slope, is exactly his program that he's proposing to us.
Finally, Bishop Anthony, let me put this to you. The Catholic Church is entitled to its doctrines, but laws in Australia are secular and practical instruments. Will the Church make it clear to Catholic MPs and MLCs that they are free to express their consciences in any vote next year and not the doctrines of the Church?
The Church will make very clear to all MPs that their role is to protect the vulnerable and the suffering, and that euthanasia laws make vulnerable people more vulnerable, and they make people who are suffering suffer even more.
And you'll take action against any Catholic in the Parliament who exercises their conscience?
We'll do our level best to educate the whole community, the Catholics included.
No excommunication?
I'm not planning any excommunications.
Bishop Anthony, thanks very much.